Another thing that happens when you've been laughing is you get an increased production of human growth hormone. That is a possible route for laughter to have a beneficial effect on your immune system.
As a neuroscientist, when we look at our brain, like what's happening in our brain when we're laughing?
There are some chemical things that we know happen, and that's easier to say for certain. So you get a reduction in adrenaline when you have been laughing very quickly. And adrenaline is the fight or flight hormone, and laughter reduces that really swiftly. In fact, if you measure your heart rate before you've been laughing and after you've been laughing, you'll notice that your heart rate drops after you've been laughing. When you're laughing, it goes up because you're doing quite a lot of work. But after the laughter has happened, the heart rate's gone down, and that's the effect of the adrenaline. But if you're watching something, for example, that you're expecting to make you laugh, you actually see that reduction in heart rate occur before it starts. The outcome of this is that you are more relaxed when you've been laughing. That's the reduction in adrenaline. And on a longer time scale, you get a reduction in cortisol. And cortisol is the sort of stress hormone. If you're having a really difficult time at work, if you're worried about lots of things, that kind of nagging feeling that you get, that is cortisol at play. It also has a really important role in waking you up in the morning, which is why you sometimes feel a bit grotty and unpleasant when you wake up. And you also get an increased uptake in what's called in your endorphins. And the endorphins are the body's natural painkillers. They are your brain and your body increase taking up endorphins when you've been exercising. That's why you feel good when you've been exercising. And the same thing happens when you've been laughing. It's one of the reasons why you feel good when you've been laughing. And also they are the natural painkillers. So actually you have a measurable increase in the pain you can tolerate when you've been laughing because of this sort of increased uptake of the endorphins. So these are all kind of associated with mood and experience. There's one last... No, it's too mad. I won't go into it. Sorry.
Well, now I'm too curious.
So I'm a bit cautious around it because sometimes people say, oh, if you laugh every day, you'll never get cancer or something like that. And we just don't know this. But there is another thing that happens when you've been laughing is you get an increased production of human growth hormone. Now, human growth hormone is very important when you're a baby and a child and you're physically growing. It's driving those physical development of your body. And by the time you're an adult and you're not getting taller, it's not the case, it's not the case that human growth hormone stops being important. You continue producing it, but now it stops being something that changes like your skeleton, and it starts, and it kind of maintains a role in your immune system. So we don't know what that is, the link is there with laughter, but that is a possible route for laughter to have a beneficial effect on your immune system. Given that we don't have any good data showing that there is a positive, it's hard to do the studies, so there's a reason why they're not out there. But does laughing every day make you less likely to be ill? We don't know. But there is the potential, at least, for that kind of association because of this role with human growth hormone.
Can you get any of the same effects if you just force yourself to laugh? Like, I always remember the thing about, like, look, you can just make yourself smile and you'll feel better. Does that work with laughter?
It certainly does for the pain-killing effect. So even forcing a laugh will affect your sort of uptake of endorphins and you're able to tolerate pain better. So, and also because laughter primes laughter, if you force yourself to laugh, you start pushing yourself along the line at which the laughter also starts to just become easier.
Do different kinds of laughter affect us differently? Like, I can think, like, my wife has kind of like like a quick laugh, and then sometimes she has like a really long laugh, and then sometimes it's just kind of like a like, do different kinds of laughter play different roles?
Definitely. From my perspective, and I'm using a kind of brain's eye view of this, there are two different ways that your brain controls noises that you make, vocalizations, and it's voluntary and involuntary. So humans are quite unusual in that we've got very high levels of voluntary control over our voice. That's how we can talk to each other or sing or beatbox or do impressions. And we have parts of the brain that you just don't find in other animals that let us control that. And we also have a much older, evolutionarily older neural pathway for controlling sounds. which actually runs down the middle of the brain, and it's the one that we share with other mammals. And we use that when we make sounds in a more involuntary way. So if something frightens you and you scream, or something makes you laugh and you absolutely cannot stop, when something pushes you over, you just absolutely uncontrollable laughter. Those involuntary vocalizations are on a different pattern of neural control in terms of how you make the sounds. And we think that what that means for laughter in particular is that sometimes when people are laughing, they are laughing really helplessly. It is completely involuntary. And those laughs are quite different from when people talk in conversations, when the laughter is much more communicative and affiliative, and it's under some greater degree of voluntary control to some amount. And those laughs can be really, like, as you say, just like a ha, or ha ha ha, ha ha, or, the whole world basically of sort of more social laughs. But they sound different from the spontaneous laughs, and people are very good at telling the difference.
So then if laughter, though, is a lot about communication, like how are we deciding when to laugh? Like how do we know, like, okay, how do we know in social situations, oh, I should laugh here, or I should laugh like this here?
It's certainly in terms of the timing, it's very interesting. People tend to laugh at the ends of sentences. Fascinatingly, this is even true of people having a sign language conversation where they could laugh all the way through if they want to. They're not talking, but they still laugh together at the ends of sentences. So that seems to be something that we learn to do. It's obvious when you think about it, but it wasn't at all obvious until the first scientists actually did studies to look at this, because I would have never agree. I would never have thought it was so highly orchestrated. And one of the things that you do is you laugh together at the end of the sentence, then you both take a breath in, and one of you then carries on talking. So it's almost like part of kind of coordinating this cycle of how we take turns. Laughter's playing a really important role in that.
And then when people kind of can't pick up on that, is that something that can really have an impact on their life? If somebody doesn't kind of speak this laughter language?
Okay, I'd say elements of neurodiversity, that, or mental health issues that are sort of intersecting with this, then that can really change how these things operate for you. So, for example, and this isn't a study we've finished yet, but we've been looking at how people with depression hear laughter, because anecdotally they often find particularly conversational laughter really irritating. And they don't find it like an invitation to join in or be part of the conversation. All they hear is the fakeness. They're not really laughing. Or that sounds stupid. So that's like your mood massively compromising your ability to sort of engage in these positive aspects of what people do when they're having a conversation. And if you think about what that then means for the kinds of social interactions you have, nothing is going to happen that's going to help your mood. It's only going to continue.
It's a downward spiral.
Exactly. In contrast, we've done some work. My PhD student now, postdoc Sophie Scott, has worked with adults with autism, who prefer the term autistic adults in her studies. She has quite good data showing that generally people with autism do laugh. It's not that they don't laugh. It's just that they are generally stuck with a lot of neurotypical people who laugh in a neurotypical way, and it can be a bit confusing for them. If they were allowed to spend all their time with other autistic adults, they might find it different. But nonetheless, you see some interesting similarities. So we did a study showing that if you add laughter onto the end of jokes, it makes the jokes seem funnier. And that was exactly the same for our neurotypical group and our autistic adults.